Once upon a time, in a far-off wood, there lived a family of two, a father of short temper, and a daughter with hair as long and black as the night sky. The two lived alone, yet led happy, simple lives. The father was a puppet maker, and every weekend, when all the day's labors had been done in the village, he would go out and set up his puppets, putting on a cheerful show of comedy and tragedy for the residents. There was food, drink, and cheer for all who could come, and it would abound as joy rippled throughout the village. The puppeteer's daughter was skilled in making puppets, and her deft, nimble hands could sculpt dolls from porcelain and wood, as if melding clay into a new sculpture. Her skill was unparalleled, and the bond between father and daughter was as close-knit as could be. However, the happiness of this family was undergirded by tragedy. Many years ago, the puppeteer's wife had fallen ill with a pox that had stricken the village and swept away many of its inhabitants to the great beyond, their souls plagued with suffering. The puppeteer's wife had been among them, and her pox had been a scar left upon father and young daughter alike. As he held his wife's dying body in his hands, the puppeteer vowed that he would never let the same fate befall his daughter, that he would protect his daughter as the last remembrance of his wife, the last true treasure that he possessed. And so it was that these two lived together in the village, happy, simple, alone but for each other, and the villagers who would come to see the plays every single night. However, as children are wont to do, as they blossom into adults, they wanted to explore and see the world. And so it was that one day, when the puppeteer was not working, fast asleep, his daughter went outside to take a walk out to enjoy the fresh air she had been denied so long. And so it was that, walking out into the forest beyond, she soon became lost and could not find her way. The forest grew dark and empty, and the sounds of terrible beasts could be heard just beyond the light, and the girl, frightened, fell deep within a ditch, cutting her leg upon an uprooted branch. Blinded by pain, she ran off further until eventually she had found her way back home. Her father, hearing her cries of pain, burst from his bed and came to see what was the source of the commotion, and seeing his injured daughter, went into a furious panic and immediately called the town's doctor, hoping that her injury was only minor. However, as things were in those days, the treatment of a simple cut was never such, and it quickly became infected. The doctor, upon his late arrival, he had been tending several patients that day, could pronounce nothing more than simple treatment and, at worst case, amputation. Now these were dark times, when one could never afford to keep off of their leg, and work was always constantly needed in order to support oneself. And so it was that the daughter, despite the admonitions of the doctor, and more importantly, her father, continued to work day in and day night, her leg growing ever more swollen and infected, and inflamed red, angry in its vengeful quest. And so it was when the doctor returned a week later, his pronouncement was most dire. Amputation was necessary. That night was long and red and full of blood, and when it was done, the girl was housebound, missing a leg, but alive, barely. The father was beside himself with guilt, and only soon as the doctor had left was he kneeling beside his daughter's cot, begging, pleading, apologizing for not saving her from the world outside, cursing himself for his ignorance, and almost letting his one remaining treasure in life pass away. But then it was that a word came to him, an idea. Love. What else did he love? What things did he treasure? And looking around his workshop, looking at the things he possessed, he realized that he could protect his daughter, make her whole again, and more hardy against the world outside. And so it was that the daughter awoke a few days later, the fever of infection having broke, and the rivers of sweat still coating her body, that she would look down and see that she now again had two legs, one flesh, bone, sinew, and skin, and the other a beautiful creamy white porcelain of perfect proportions and expertly painted, now attached to her leg, the ability to walk restored, though no feeling could be had within that new extremity. Her father lay beside the bed, passed out from exhaustion, woodworking tools still in his hand from the final details he had added to that porcelain contraption. The daughter, relieved to be alive, grasped her father and hugged him tightly. "Thank you, father, thank you so," she would plead, begging him, thanking him. He had provided the gift she had assumed she would not be able to receive, and the father, tired though he was, awoke from his slumber and embraced his daughter back in turn. However, as things are wont to do, even with this memory fresh in her mind, the girl still did want to see the world, and of course, the village itself and many other things are not the woods, and there are not ditches everywhere, branches reaching out to deliver a most fatal and infectious scratch. She would beg of her father to let her see the show that would happen that weekend, to go to a local dance, or to go out and procure food for the family, but her father would hear it none. "My daughter, I love you so, and you are my one remaining treasure," he would repeatedly yell, "and I have done much work, much labor to protect you, and as it were, I will not see you harmed by this outside world again and taken from me." And so this tension existed beneath that seemingly happy home, until it was one night, again her father fast asleep at the workbench, that the girl decided that she would go out and see what the world had to offer. There was a dance that evening, and she had heard that all the boys and girls of the village would be there as well, and she wanted to meet others her age, those she'd only read about in the tales and the scant books her father kept in the workshop. And so it was, securing her porcelain leg, the girl would venture out of the window and into the streets of the town beyond. The dance was just beyond the horizon, a light emanating along the cold, dark streets, and soon, as if thrust from the dark into the light, she could see the whirlwind of social activity, those turning to see the new face of the puppeteer's daughter, isolated as she was, for the first time at a social event. The girl went, and she made merry, having fun dancing through the town, dancing with boys and girls alike. As it was, isolated from the world, yet she was of a quirky sort, with a temperament unlike others her age, and so it was that soon words began to reach her ears, words she had not expected, but cut incisively nevertheless. Stranger, weird, quirky, harsh, grating words sliding down the throat, a bitter pill, and hearing these insults cast not on her just on her character, but on her form as well. Hair as black and glossy as a slug, eyes as big as a toad's, and she smelled like one too. It would not be long before she left running from the ball, tears streaming from her face. Her father awoke that night to see her before the mirror in their bathroom, tearing at her hair, pulling at it, wishing she had never had it to begin with. And it was in that pain that she fell asleep, tired from the burdens of a cruel world she had not been prepared for. The father's heart weighed heavy with these realizations, the pain his daughter was going through, even as he was angry for her disobeying him. But yet he was a loving man, and he wanted to ease his daughter's pain. And so it would be that next morning, when the daughter awoke and found upon her hair not strands ripped out and bloody, but a beautiful, perfect wig, each strand perfectly placed, doll's hair replacing her own. Picturesque, perfect, immutable to time itself, and her father, sweat dripping off his brow, leaning over her, applying the last touches. My daughter, they will not insult you no more. But you see why we have not gone to the outside world, why you must stay here. It took your mother. I would not have it take you, solely you, in your perfection. And so it was they remained for a time, the father's admonitions and strict words instilling terror in the girl, exacerbating that painful, harrowing memory she had from her time at the dance. And of course, a third time, again, the girl would long to go out. The summer had come, and the warmth could be felt coming through the windows and heating up the house, and she longed, just for a moment, to wander outside, to feel the sun's rays upon her, not through a window, but alongside the breeze and the apples. She would not be seeing anyone else, she would tell her father, but her father still strictly forbade it. The outside world had taken too much, and he, in his limited travels outside it, could see all it was and tell her of it when he returned. Another show, just as he had done on the many weekends prior. And of course, the girl was now a teenager, and she longed to see what the outside world could offer. The warmth, the kindness it seemed to come through the windows, even though it had shown her so much ill already. And so it was, when the father was at his lunch, and most distracted by a tender sandwich, that she slept at the door and would go out to experience the sun. The sun which would gaze down upon her, sending its warm rays of light, and she would delight. But as she spent time outside, she fell fast asleep, far longer than she had intended to stay, only a few minutes outside the notice of her father. And so it was that the father, noticing the absence of his daughter, would rush outdoors, yelling, praying, begging to see his daughter once more. The daughter had fallen asleep, and in that time the gentle rays of the sun had turned into vicious, angry stares, a symptom many of us are all too familiar with, red blisters and burns forming along the skin, until she awoke as she turned on her side to feel the gentle touch of grass, now an agonizing stroke, a sword cast upon her flesh and skin. The father could hear her cries of pain, and rushing forth, saw her reddened skin peeling and fraying at the edges, and grabbing her as gingerly but urgently as he could, rushed her inside to the safety of the home. He had no creams to treat the sunburn. This was not the time or era for such things, but as a puppeteer he could fix the problem the only way he knew how, and as the girl lapsed into unconsciousness, pain scouring and racking her flesh and bones, the father set to work, and so it was she would awaken, with skin as hard and immutable and perfect as porcelain, and unbreakable by the rays of the sun and its harsh admonitions. The girl had little to feel else now but her emotions, and indeed she woke up afraid but comforted by her father. But of course, all things are not to last, even things as immutable as a doll's porcelain. And it was that she would continue to blossom, maturing to an age even as her skin would tighten and cracken, the porcelain straining beyond its bounds. And so it was, at great maturity, as these multiple arrangements of pain continued to twist her, that the girl would find love, a young woman who would every day in the streets beyond carry 2 pails of water to the nearby well. The girl would stare out longingly, eyes encased in porcelain, at this woman, and seeing her activities, the kindness she would treat others as she passed by, and the tenderness with which she would carry these pails of water, began to imagine meeting this woman and coming to know her. And so it was that her heart was stolen. First love. For a time, this enamoration was kept secret, an internal passion burning bright within her porcelain skin and perfect hair. But of course, one cannot keep these secrets within forever, and so it was at a dinner one night, father happily eating away at his supper, his perfect world maintained, that the daughter shattered it with her pronouncement, "Father, I have fallen in love with a woman, and I wish to see her." Immediately the father was enraged. Despite all his effort, she still wanted to go outside to see more, despite how much it had hurt her. The father was a wounded soul, not understanding that one could recover from these things. He was set in his ways, and set in protecting his daughter the only way he knew how. And so, as his daughter slept, he did the only thing he could do. He made sure that her heart could never be stolen again. And so his daughter would wake up the next day, the rush of blood through her body now ice cold, her veins wires, and her heart a beautiful lace-encrusted gem, the remnant of her mother's love for her father, her new heart, eternally a belonging of his that could never be stolen away again. The girl never suffered from the passion of enamoration again, the object of her former affection now a distant memory. And so she sat and held her father, the porcelain no longer straining, as there was nothing left to grow. And the girl sat, porcelain limb, hand, and eye, sat on her wire frame, just as her father had made her to be. Of course, her father was still a man, and after many moons and many years, he would pass away of age. And yet, even as that house would crumble, and many in the village would wonder what had become of the daughter, the windows breaking in, mildew and rot ensuing, the daughter would sit upon her bed, porcelain fingers twiddling, making new dolls, her skin unblemished by the sun, her flesh unmarred by root and maw, her heart unstolen by the vicarities of human nature. Where she sits now, eternal, unbreaking, perfect.